sound? Oh. The truth is, I'm not much of a public speaker, and actually I'm quite a private person. So to speak in front of this number of people is quite daunting, and I hope you forgive me if I'm a bit nervous. A few months back, we were sitting at a Bonei Olam meeting, discussing this evening. These meetings are usually held around midnight with lots of food. And I asked quite innocently, who is going to be speaking about the world of those who are having difficulty in having children? And they said to me, we've got somebody in mind. Well, here I am. Before I start with what I'm here to talk about, I must say a few words about my dear friend Avram. We got to know each other when we learned B'chavusa in the afternoon Seder in Mir, and from then we became close friends. The friendship continued in Manchester, our wives being longtime friends, and we learned once again together in the evening in the Chabura here. I must say, if Avram would have been here tonight, he would have teased me for doing this, but in his usual charming way. I believe this evening is a fitting sechus for his dear neshama. Before I started, I looked up in an online dictionary, what is the actual definition of a journey? And it came up as an occasion when you travel from one place to another, especially when there's a long distance between the places. I believe that the world of infertility is truly a journey of distance. So our journey began like many young couples, although mine was slightly different. When I got married, I had just lost my mother, and I very much wanted to have a daughter who I could name after her. We started married life in Eretz Yisrael, and truthfully, as much as I hoped every month for something to happen, we were very much enjoying the experience of living and breathing the air of Eretz Yisrael. But all great things had to come to an end, and we then moved back to the UK. The years seemed to progress with nothing much happening. But when I say actually nothing much happened, a lot was happening. Younger siblings were getting married and having kids. Going to the home with my parents-in-law was getting quite difficult and painful. There was always many kids around. At weddings and simchas of younger siblings and cousins, we got the certain nebuch looks and the Mir Tzv Hashem by you. And truthfully, they were difficult. It was hard to hear that, but understandable. We understood. People really cared. And people don't quite know what to say in such situations. At that time, we had started treatment, and it was a long and a difficult process at that time. A major factor of this journey, the journey of infertility, is loneliness and the feeling that there just isn't anybody to talk to. There's a certain taboo here that we just don't talk about infertility. Even to close family, you just can't discuss it. This was pre-Bonei Olam days when there was not much support around. Furthermore, for some odd, strange reason, you feel quite ashamed at your predicament, when in essence, it's a medical issue, like any other medical issue. But there is a certain amount of being quite ashamed. At this time just ceases to exist. There were times we couldn't go to friends' simchas, and people obviously thought we were bitter. We don't want to go to a simcha. But how could we go to an engagement in London, let's say, when we had to be in hospital at 7 a.m.? Happy times of the Jewish calendar, Simchas Torah, Chanukah, Purim, Seder night, were instances to be avoided at all cost. For me, Simchas Torah was the worst. There were times to dread, and truthfully, avoiding them came at further financial and emotional cost. Yom Tov away was fantastic. It was nice having all these times to go away, but it was essential for our normality. It was a very lonely and painful time. But then, after 7 years of countless disappointments and many thousands of pounds spent, we were truly blessed with a fantastic daughter, Debbie. Who was named after my dear mother, Devorah. She was cute. She was so perfect. And in an instant, all our years of pain and loneliness just seemed to melt away. I remember sitting by her cot every night, just looking at her and touching her, just to make sure she's okay. And from that moment on, our lives changed forever. We joined the club. We joined the parent club. We could socialize again. We could talk about playgroups. We could feel comfortable going for Yontif to my in-laws. It was like we had got our life back. I can't remember exactly the time frame, but a few years down the line, we were talking to our little daughter, and the question came up, possibly it was around Purim time, maybe not, maybe it was in school, and we said to her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" We expected, she loved dressing up, we expected, "I want to be a princess, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a teacher." But she only ever gave us one answer. She's a bright kid. She's always said to us, "I just want to be a sister." This broke my heart. So the second part of our journey began. But truthfully, as Rav Horowitz Shlita told me, the difference from having no children to get to one child is far away than from one child to get to two children. Although I believe there is less pressure, but the immense longing for a sibling is great. At that time, the choice we made was to go to Eretz Yisrael, thinking that at least the views from the hospital or on the way home, looking over the Horei Yehuda, would be more appealing than the views of Manchester, driving through Cheetham Hill. Sorry, Mr. Sedler, you can set up care in Jerusalem sometime. And of course, being in Eretz Yisrael, closer to the Mekomas HaKadoshim, was a certain comfort. But being away from home was difficult, especially with a toddler in tow. I remember schlepping her out of bed. In Israel, it's 6 in the morning, and taking her to the hospital. But at that time, we hoped the second time would be quicker and less painful. In fact, the second part of our journey was probably tougher than the first. There were further disappointments, but after a while, we received the amazing, totally unexpected news that we were expecting triplets. Of course, this was a total shock, but we were so happy and delighted. Triplets is not easy, a pregnancy, it was difficult, but we were ecstatic that that her dream of becoming a sister would then happen in a few months' time. At 20 weeks down the line, on a Friday night, was the start of our nightmare. We were then rushed to hospital, and the doctors managed to stop us losing the pregnancy immediately, although they told us we needed to get to 23 weeks for any chance of success. It was not to be. And after 3 weeks of my wife physically not moving in hospital, the pregnancy ended, and we lost our precious children. I call them children because I remember the call I received the next day from Reb Shlomo Adler, Oliver Shalom of the Chevra Kadisha. And he told us I had to give names before the Kavura, and give a name that we would never use again in the future. Truthfully, in my mind, I sort of laughed. I thought, we're not going to have any more kids. I can use any names. It doesn't really bother me. But I thought, he told me to give a name which is not a family name, so I did that. I called the boy, one of the boys was called Chaim. I thought it was appropriate. The second one was a boy, which I called Menachem, because it happened on Rosh Chodesh Av. And then there was a girl, and the girl I called Basia. That name, I don't know. It seemed to pop into my head. I'm going to deviate a little here, with a short story about this name. My wife's grandmother, that's my shver's mother, who was truly a tzadekes, with immense emunah peshuta, was nifted not long before. Her name was Sarah, and we imagined if we would have a girl, it would have been an honor to call her after this special lady. After this whole terrible episode, we came home shattered, completely shattered. And my parents-in-law, of course, came to us for that Shabbos to give us a hand. And I told my father-in-law, on the way home from shul, I remember from Vine Street, I told him about the names. I told him that I'd named the girl Batya. I saw him, he had a certain look on his face, and he then told me a story. He said his mother was deathly ill many, many years before, and she lived in the East End, although at that time she was living in Stamford Hill, and the Sasva or the Triska Rebbe, I can't remember who it was, they added a name, and she actually got better, and she lived until the ripe age of 94. But the added name just didn't stick, and it was somewhat forgotten. So when she was nifta, my father-in-law asked the Rav if he should put the added name on the matzeva. And he was told, good question, he was told, seeing as she was never known as that, it was not necessary. My father-in-law, who was an only child, he accepted the Pesach, but felt a niggling discomfort that this name, which had actually, in a sense, had worked, was gone and was forgotten. The added name of my father-in-law's mother was Batya. Knowing this gave us a certain measure of nechama, that in fact, one of the girls was named after her. Coming back to our journey, our chapter, one of the hardest jobs of this journey was to tell our daughter that she would not have a dream fulfilled. She was not going to be a sister. I remember going to school, to Broughton Jewish. I took her out of school, and I broke the news to her. I went out, we went shopping, I bought her lots of presents, and then I went home, and I just cried. It was devastating, totally devastating, just to tell her the news. More years passed, and we put everything into our fantastic daughter, thinking that possibly she was going to be our only child. It was now 10 years after our first simcha, and we found out that we were expecting once again. We didn't tell a soul, not family, nobody. After all the emotional scarring, we could not believe that this pregnancy was going to end well. It wasn't 9 months. It wasn't 40 weeks. It was 280 days of fear. At every milestone of this new chapter, 6 weeks, 21 weeks, 30 weeks, we breathed a sigh of relief. And then on time, after 10 years of longing and waiting, my daughter Debbie got her wish, and she became a big sister. This picture of my 10-year-old holding her little sister, both looking in each other's eyes, is very, very special to me, and I do look at it very often. My daughter Adina is feisty. She's full of life with a really kind heart. And both my kids are everything to me, and I love to spend every spare moment with them. That is the end of my journey so far. I hope I haven't bored you at all with my story, but I really want you to know that it really is an honor to stand in front of so many people who have cared enough to put their hands in their pocket and to help Bonei Olam, help the couples who are desperate to become parents. When I say desperate, it really is. It's a desperate feeling in your heart. The unbelievable fact is that most couples can be helped. The advances in technology, even from our 10 years being through it, is a personal gift from Hashem to us. And it's truly a miracle. But there is one thing that is stopping young couples becoming parents. It's not medical. It's money. With your money that you have so kindly donated, we can help to increase the growing number of babies born with the help of Bonei Olam. Think of it. Close your eyes if you want to. 45 babies born since we started here in Manchester in 2009. That means you're giving life to 90 parents, countless grandparents and siblings. With your money, you are in certain sense telling these waiting parents that they will have children with enough effort and with enough technology, they will become parents. That's the end of my story, and I thank you for listening.